Now, that is Quranic ethics, transcends sects actually. When you talk about Islamic ethics, or what is known as ilm al-akhlaq, knowledge of ethics, that is a particular Islamic science, or a particular discipline within seminaries. Now this science, it has existed in the past. People like Naraki, Tusi, Ghazali, Isfahani, classical scholars, post-Ghaiba scholars, have actually developed this kind of science. And some of these works are translated in English. Raghib al-Isfahani's Ethics, Nasiruddin Tusi's Ethics, Ghazali's Ethics, you'll find these books, they're there. But applied ethics, as I said, has not been present. Another way of looking at ethics is from the discipline of Irfan. The ilm al-akhlaq is much more to do with the Quranic ethics and perhaps society. Irfan, or mysticism, or journeying towards Allah, and I'm giving a bit of history, is more to do with how I become proximate to God. And to be frank, this got nothing to do with society. It is in the way that I apply and I interact, but it's a very individual-based science. How should I fast? And how many times should I fast? How do I develop that irada and keep to my irada, my intention or my niyyah, my sort of focus and goal towards Allah? How do I do that every day? I'm going to get up for Salatul Fajr. I'm going to do good deeds. How do I be disciplined about that? It's about cultivating that discipline. Finally, when you talk about ethics, or when you talk about Islamic ethics, the difference with other modes of ethics is that it is rooted in vicegerency, which is a very key principle from Surah Al-Baqarah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Baqarah verse 30, says, Inni ja'ilun fil ardi khalifa. Indeed, I'm placing on the earth a vicegerent. And as you all know the episode, the angels say, no, what are you doing? There's going to be bloodshed and corruption. Allah says, I know what you do not know. Not only that, as human beings, in Surah number 33, Allah says that I try to give the trust of this earth to the heavens and the mountains. They all rejected it. We accepted it, but Allah says, well, you're a tyrant, you're a fool. And we're a bit stupid in that way because we create fasad. And I'm not saying that in a negative way, that is some kind of maslihah in the way Allah has created human beings. It means we have a responsibility in how we act towards ourselves and the way we act towards others. And finally, in Surah Bani Israel, Allah actually says that He honored the children of Adam. Honored meaning, karamna, meaning that we are created with that innate moral constitution. Ethics is within us. So when you talk about Islamic ethics, it's rooted in vicegerency, having responsibility. And number two, that the idea of Rabb and Abd, that of Lord and servant. I am a servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there's a great wisdom here. It prevents subjectivity and arrogance. I am to go about my life with taqwa, God consciousness, and shukr, thankfulness. Always thanking Allah that even the way I'm speaking just now with my hands, that these limbs can move. That is a very beautiful type of ethics because it acknowledges one, realities of creation, that there is Allah, and two, that beautiful relationship of serving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Salawat, please. So that is Islamic ethics. Then going on to this title, obviously, which you have chosen, Etiquettes of Islamic Morality and relationships with Muslims, relationship with non-Muslims. Well, you already know my position that I don't believe there's too much distinction, personally, between these two things. But I'll just give you an outline of some of the concepts and rights which Muslims are to act with towards human beings. One is the idea of justice. In Surah An-Nisa verse 135, Allah says, O you who believe, be maintainers of justice, bearers of witness of Allah's sake. Through it, though it may be against yourselves to act justly, and for you to act towards your parents or near relatives, if he be rich or poor. Allah is nearer to them both in compassion. Therefore don't follow your lowly desires, lest you deviate And if you swerve or turn aside, then surely Allah is aware of what you do. It's a very universal language. Sometimes, in my humble opinion, there is a misconception when it comes to believers and disbelievers. When Allah is saying, O you who believe, I think there's a wisdom here. And there's a wisdom in terms of the Prophet's actions. The Prophet tried to create a community, note community, a community of people who subscribe to the notion that there was somebody greater than them, Allah, and that there were morals or principles that transcended their desires. Look at the difference in the language that I'm using, which I've taken from the Quran, it's nothing from me, and look at the language that is used in a very dichotomized way when we talk about Muslim, non-Muslim, East and West, religion and non-religion. A community of believers, a community that subscribes to something that is greater than yourself and greater than your desires. That Western philosophers would say is very Kantian. Can you see the difference now? It's how we understand the Quran as a universal message. If we look at it within this wisdom, we find that the framework of justice is extremely universal. Second example about life. Allah says in Surah Al-Ma'idah, verse 32, and you all know this verse, that if you take a life, it's as if you take the whole of humanity. And if you save a life, it's as if you save the whole of humanity. I mean, life itself, it doesn't have any sectarian sort of or cultural connotations. Another one, which is one of my favorite ones, and this is from Ali ibn Abi Talib, alayhi salam, in his letter to Malik al-Ashtar on governance, letter 52, or in some editions 53 of Nahj al-Balagha, he says, infuse your heart with mercy, love and kindness for your subjects. Be not in face of them a voracious animal, counting them as easy prey. For they are of two kinds. Either they are your brothers in religion or your equals in creation. Subhanallah. To this day, you can develop so much philosophy just from these three lines. Another example on leadership, which is also my favorite thing. Zain al-Abidin says in Risalat al-Hukuk, he says, the right of your subjects through authority is that you should know that they have been made subjects through their weakness and your strength. Hence, it is incumbent upon you to act with justice toward them, and this is my favorite line, and to be like a compassionate father toward them. You should forgive them their ignorance and not hurry them to punishment. And you should thank God for the power over them which He has given to you. You see that there is no issue of race. There is no issue of dictatorship. Risalat al-Hukuk, one of the earliest human rights charters in history, by the way, not many people know that, written in the 7th century or compiled in the 7th century. He approaches rights from all angles. As I said, God has the greatest right over us. Then he goes on to one of the unknown sort of concepts, at least in my humble research so far, hukukun nafs, rights to oneself. He says every human being, his hand or her hand, has a right against himself, or a tongue has a right against me. My private part has a right against me. My stomach has a right against me. What does that mean? It means that I actually owe a right to my hand. So when you talk about the frustrated terrorist or the aggressive individual, if you were to filter down this kind of right, rather than right to privacy and freedom of information and my right, which are valid rights, but you need an internal human constitution or a contract. And he's saying, look, you owe a right to your hand, meaning already you are superseded by your biological tools in the way you act. It's a very beautiful way of controlling and directing the human being. Can you see that? This one which I quoted about the subjects, I find it beautiful because he looks at a leader like a compassionate father.